I knew I was getting old when I thought, hey, you know what would make my life better? A subscription to the New York Times. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video, a much more cozy video than y'all are used to. I'm all tucked in. I hope that whatever time of day you're watching this, you're at the very least comfortable. And if this isn't a welcome back, and this is actually your first time stumbling onto my little booktube section of the internet, I know you got a quick question. Yo, Chris reads? And yeah, I do know how to read. Allegedly. And today we're going to be talking about the 100 notable books of 2024 according to the New York Times. I'll admit it, y'all, I was influenced. I got the notification that the New York Times had released their 100 notable books of 2024, which is the standout fiction and nonfiction of the year selected by the staff of the New York Times Book Review. So I wanted to make this video for two reasons. First and foremost, hey, we all need an excuse to add some books to our TBR, right? And I'm hoping this will be a very good list of books, or at least interesting books that I might add. But also second, I know that these are books that I don't have on my bookshelf, or a majority are going to be books I don't have on my bookshelf. And they're also going to be books that I have no idea that they exist. So I wanted to use this video and going through this list for the first time, for me and for y'all watching this, as kind of an exercise in collective unknowing, if that makes sense, right? And together we can go through this list, we can find books that we've never heard of, genres that we've never heard of maybe, and let's get started. So first and foremost, we have All Fours by Miranda July, the unnamed heroine of July's gaspingly explicit comic novel. All right, plans a cross-country road trip only to stop 30 minutes from home. There, she lavishly redecorates a motel room and begins an odd but passionate affair with a younger man who works at a rental car agency. I don't know if it was this book exactly, but I think Jack Edwards talked about this book in one of his more recent videos. Sexy perimenopause fiction is a genre, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe it's because I'm a man. I didn't know this existed. So I don't want to delve too deep into All Fours or any book that we see, because we do have 99 more of these to go. But I do have a list in my notes app where I have all the books that I want to, be on the lookout for. I don't think I'm going to add this one to it. I think I'm going to try and stick to like the little 1 or 2 sentence blurb it gives you. And I think this might be a book where, like, if I see it or if I go to someone's house and they have it, I'll read it, but it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to read. Next up, in speculative fiction, Beautyland by Marie Helen Bertino, or Helene. If her name's Marie Helene, that's awesome. In 1970s Philadelphia, an alien girl sent to Earth before she's born communicates with her fellow life forms via fax as she helps gather intel about whether our planet is habitable. This funny, sad novel follows a girl and her single mother as they find the means to persevere. And it also gives like a little thing for fans of the Book of Strange New Things by Michael Faber and Contact by Carl Sagan, I have read a little bit of Contact by Carl Sagan, not all of it, but I did enjoy it. This is interesting. I haven't read too much speculative fiction, at least I don't think I have. But again, 1 or 2 sentence blurb, you've got my attention. I've read a little bit of Contact by Carl Sagan. I'm interested. So far, 50% of the books we've seen have been added to the list. I think those are good numbers. Next up, Noir, Black River by Nilanjana Roy. This brilliant, brutal, and utterly affecting novel about the murder of an 8-year-old child in rural India uses the trappings of the mystery to examine deeper ills in the entire country. This is interesting because normally I wouldn't be interested in a book like this. One of the things I want to do more is diversify my reading, both in terms of genre and who writes the books that I'm reading. And I Googled the author, and she's Indian. She's an Indian-born author. So not only am I reading a book from an Indian-born author, but also it is about India. And I love a little noir kind of classic story. And if we can have a book that delves into a mystery and also kind of expands that into talking about the country of India as a whole, coming from someone who was born in that country, I think that would be dope. I think that would be raw. We are adding this book 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 are being added to the list. These are good numbers. These are good odds. Maybe I'm late to the party, but maybe the New York Times book review squad knows what they're talking about. This is a poetry book, and poetry is something that both I haven't really read a lot of, and also something that I've never been particularly inclined to start reading. But again, we're diversifying our reading, and this is Bluff by Danez Smith. Smith's poetry balances a delight in the possibilities of language with an innate skepticism about its use in the world. Here is a poet who nurses the tension between art and action and exhorts readers to acknowledge injustice while appreciating the chaotic nature of human existence. For fans of two books I've never heard of. And I'm not opposed to reading poetry at all. I think eventually poetry is going to be something that I kind of get into more as I start reading, you know, different kinds of books from different types of authors. I don't think that from this 1 or 2 sentence blurb, this doesn't really sell me on it personally. But please, if y'all have any like familiarity with this author or with any of the authors that we talk about in this video, please leave a comment down below kind of giving me y'all's opinions, because I'd love to hear it. We have a small community here. I don't even have 100 subscribers yet at the time of watching this video. So like every person that watches this and likes and comments and stuff, it's like we can actually have a conversation. The Book of Love, a fantasy epic by Kelly Link. I saw this when I was at Barnes & Noble a few days ago, the cover. After 3 teenagers are brought back from the dead, the magic-wielding band teacher who revived them gives them a series of tasks to stay alive. This is the first novel of a master of the short story, and it pushes our understanding of what a fantasy could be. I will say this has my curiosity. It does not have my attention. I do think it's really cool that this is the first novel from someone who has written mostly short stories before. I think that transition, just from the outside looking in, I've never tried to write anything in my life, but I can imagine that going from short story to novel, as simple as it might sound, like just write more, you know, can be really intimidating, and it can be really hard to deal with those extra like 100, if not hundreds of pages that you have to fill out. But if this is pushing the boundaries or pushing our understanding of what fantasy can be, I think they're doing something right. So like I said, has my curiosity, does not have my attention, but this might be one of those books I come back to in the future. Arthurian Fantasy, The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman, who is best known for his Magician series, is at the top of his game with his take on the myth of King Arthur, which resoundingly earns its place among the best of Arthurian tales. Never been a big King Arthur guy. I was more of like a Dragon Tales fetch with Rough Ruffman kind of kid. So I was never too big on King Arthur, but I'm sure the people that like King Arthur would like this book. It ain't me though. Ooh, literary fiction. I know Jack Edwards going crazy right now. The narrator of the smart and sneering novel of Capital and Its Consequences is an unnamed Palestinian school teacher in New York City who becomes involved in a scheme to buy an Hermes Birkin bag and scalp them to trashy and unworthy buyers. In a spiraling, hallucinogenic plot, the narrator seesaws between jaded American consumerism and the sadness and guilt of displacement, for the fans of The Guest by Emma Cline and My Year of Rest and Relaxation. 2 books that I have heard crazy good things about. The thing that got me, and this was after I had heard a couple people review it, the thing that got me was the cover. I don't know what it is about that pink bordered cover, but I love that cover so much. So if this book is anything like what I've heard My Year of Rest and Relaxation is about, I'm adding it to the list off rip. We have a mixed race dramedy. Again, genres I've never heard of. I love that these exist. Colored Television by Dan Z. Senna. The internal conflict between making art and selling out gets a fresh take in Senna's funny, foxy, and fleet new novel about a struggling mixed race couple. She's a writer. He's a painter. They live in Los Angeles. They pay too much for rent. The jokes are good, the punches land, and the dialogue is tart. You often feel like you're listening in on 3 bottles into it dinner party. I would say this neither has my curiosity nor my attention. I've never looked at a book or wanted to read a book because it was funny, if that makes sense. Like, I read Born a Crime by Trevor Noah forever ago, and the guy's a comedian. The guy knows how to tell a good story and tell a joke. But to walk into a book knowing that it's a comedy, I don't know. Books have never been like comedic for me. So praising a book for its comedy is weird for me. I think it's because I love stand-up comedy so much that I'm not used to it being in like the written form, especially in like a fictionalized written form. This has my curiosity. It does not have my attention. And maybe when I read some of my other books, I'll come back to this, but for right now, I'm good. I hope y'all saw me physically get closer. Literary fiction with a soup con of spy. Oh wait, no, it has a little thing. So like I'm supposed to pronounce it differently.
Soupçon.
Soupçon? Oh, so we're French now? What are you, my roommate? Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. The name sounds familiar. I might have like read or maybe seen a cover of her somewhere. An American agent infiltrates a commune of French environmentalists in Kushner's philosophical rendition of the spy novel, which blends pointed comic observation with earnestness in a vinaigrette. We're talking about salads now? You know from this book's opening paragraphs that you're in the hands of a major writer, one with a gift for almost effortless intellectual penetration. I do like this cover though. This cover's rad, but I will say the 3 other books that I have listed, I want to read more than this. And they made me say soupçon as soupcon, so I'm not happy about that. So we're gonna skip this one. Speculative fiction, Dead in Long Beach, California by Vanita Blackburn. Her first novel, after 2 inventive short story collections, is an experimental and disarmingly funny look, more comedy. Funny look at death and loss. Narrated by dystopian artificial intelligence machines, the story follows a woman who impersonates her brother by texting from his phone after his suicide. This has my curiosity and my attention. Like that's a crazy blurb and it immediately gets me hooked. That's what I wanted from this video, was because I know sometimes they go crazy, especially with SoupCon, but like these New York Times writer be spitting. The Impusium by Olga Tokarzuk. I hope I said that right the first time. We're gonna keep on rolling like I did. 1913, at a health resort in what is now Poland, a shy and sickly student discovers a terrible secret. Every year, around the first full moon in November, a man, sometimes 2, is torn to pieces in the nearby forest. This novel by the 2018 Nobel laureate, translated by Antonio Lloyd-Jones, pits nature against the state and social world with a particular emphasis on gender. So what I've just cut out of this video is me just staring in silence at this little blurb right here to see if I would read this book. And I think the answer is still no, but I know that this article isn't going anywhere and I can come back to this if I wanted to. I have a current TBR. I'm gonna have an even longer TBR once I finish this list. So I'm not gonna add it to my list, but like I think this might be one of those ones that I come back to and be like, oh, this was vaguely interesting. Let me actually check it out. But for right now, we are skipping it and moving on to The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, excuse me. A lowly servant girl in 16th century Spain has a secret. There's magic in her fingertips, perhaps the kind that anxious kings and other assorted schemers would kill for. The best-selling fantasist Bardugo infuses this new standalone novel with both rich historical detail and a heady sense of place and romance. I'm still kind of iffy on fantasy. I'm making my way through Way of Kings right now by Brandon Sanderson, and then after that I'm gonna read Dune, and those are 2 like thick fantasy books, and so I don't know if I want to add more fantasy to my list. Actually, I do know if I want to add more fantasy to my list, and the answer is no. Just based off this cover, like I would pick this up and read a couple pages if I was thinking about buying it in person. Another poetry book, A Film in Which I Play Everyone, that's a dope title, by Mary Jo Bang. The poems in Bang's latest collection, her 9th, are full of pleasure, color, sound, and light, but also torment. That's a great covers. I love a great cover on a book. I think especially now in an age where you can get designers, you can get photographers, you can get anybody to make you a good cover. If your book has a bad cover, you're doing it on purpose. I'll see if I can place the book that I'm thinking about on screen right now, but it's like touted as like one of the biggest books of the year on Book Talk, and the cover is trash. Some more poetry. Okay, we're gonna keep it rolling. Forest of Noise by Masab Abu Toha. Written in the months before Israel's invasion of Gaza, these poems conjure memories of orange trees, lost families, and brutal airstrikes with palpable grief and uncertainty. Even our souls, writes Abu Toha, a Palestinian poet, get stuck under the rubble. That's tough. I haven't added any poetry to the list yet, and I might add some in the future, but with such a sensitive and important topic that is obviously still going on currently as I'm recording this video, I'll add it to the list. I guess like what explains my hesitancy towards poetry is that I've just never really read it before, or intensely read it, for lack of a better word. So there's like a certain like hesitation that comes with it. So I think like with a subject matter like this, it's something that I will be invested in and that I could learn something both from the poetry or of the poetry and of the subject matter. Funny story by Emily Henry. Bro, Emily Henry, I talked about this in my Why Men Don't Read video. I got no problem with romance and especially with the litany of female voices on BookTube. Emily Henry's name gets thrown around so much. I'm starting to think I'm the problem for not wanting to read one of her books. Not even not wanting to read a romance. Like, I joke about it all the time, but like, I'll read a romance. I don't care. I just have so much other stuff I would rather read. But if Funny Story is a notable book by the New York Times, maybe I'm the one that's missing out. In this heartfelt and humorous romp, a librarian and a bartender move in together after their respective partners leave them for each other. That's crazy. Though they're polar opposites, she's introspective and insecure. He's gregarious and emotionally guarded. They have an immediate connection. Like, this sounds cute, don't get me wrong, but like, I'm in no way, shape, or form interested in reading an Emily Henry book. But again, I might be wrong. Maybe I should be reading Emily Henry. Maybe my life would be crazy better, you know? Ooh, we have a horror book. If you haven't seen my rating my roommate's bookcase video, my roommate loves horror books. Ghost Roots by Pemi Aguda. These stories set in an alternate version of Lagos, Nigeria, in which supernatural phenomena make the impossible commonplace, unflinchingly explore complicated human emotions. Wildly inventive and odd, but written with surgeon-like precision, they herald the arrival of a major voice in speculative fiction. I've never read any horror books. Like, I want to read Stephen King. I actually want to add some of his books to my TBR. I've never read like really any horror books. I think reading a horror book from a Nigerian author would be dope. It'd be a great entrance, I think, especially one that has like caught some buzz in 2024. And then also reading Stephen King would be dope too, but we're gonna add this to the list. This is a good intro to horror, kind of interesting intro to a new author as well. The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. A pair of missing siblings at an Adirondack. I said that incorrectly. Summer camp spark a reckoning about the powerful, wealthy, and possibly wicked family whose house and presence loom over the lakeside idyll. Who's to say? I'm skipping this one. I'm not, it doesn't interest me. Godwin by Joseph O'Neill. This globetrotting novel by the author of Netherland chronicles the quest of a man named Mark Wolf to find a mysterious soccer prodigy in West Africa and the unraveling of his workplace back in Pittsburgh. Mark shares narrational duties with his colleague Lakeisha Williams. Their stories build into a study of greed and ambition that our critic called populous, lively, and intellectually challenging. I think this book might be interesting. I don't want to read any reviews about it. With most of the books that I read, I kind of like going in blind. So like I said, I will add this to the list, but it'll kind of be towards like the end of like what I actually am going to read. Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This is a romantic comedy. I didn't know that, but the thing I did know is that I've seen this cover around Barnes and Nobel, and the cover's dope. A 35-year-old struggling to make sense of a breakup delivers the most delightful aspects of romantic comedy. Snappy dialogue, realistic relationship dynamics, funny meet-cutes and misunderstandings, and leaves behind cliche gender roles and the traditional marriage plot. This leaves behind cliche gender roles and the traditional marriage plot. That sentence in and of itself is it piques my curiosity, because I don't like kind of the cliched, like the thing about an enemies to lovers book that sounds so off-putting to me is like, why would I read a book called Enemies to Lovers when I know the enemies will become lovers? Like, I know the end of the book. I know what's going to happen. Of course, the stuff in the middle might change, but like, I know that the people that are enemies at the beginning of the book or the friends that are friends at the beginning of the book are going to be lovers at the end of the book. So like, the ending doesn't really, or excuse me, the middle doesn't really matter as much to me when I know the beginning and I know the end. But if this goes a little bit different than that, then maybe, you know, hey, Dolly Alderton, welcome to the list. Political fiction, Great Expectations by Vincent Cunningham. In this impressive first novel, a black campaign aide coolly observes as aspiring power players angle to connect with a candidate who more than resembles Barack Obama. I have no issues with political fiction, no qualms with it, but this blurb don't do it for me. We're gonna skip. Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle. Set at a young women's boxing tournament in Reno, Nevada, this novel centers on 8 contestants and the fights, physical and emotional, they bring to the ring. As our critic writes, this story's impact lasts a long time like a sharp fist to your shoulder. I think we're gonna skip this one, but I will keep an eye out, seeing especially if this is a punchy debut novel. I will keep an eye out on Rita Bullwinkle, and maybe if she releases something else that more so piques my interest, I will read it, but I don't think I'm going to be reading Headshot anytime soon. The Hunter by Tana French. French's moody, mesmerizing thriller, a sequel of sorts to The Searcher, paints a rich portrait of a rural community in Western Ireland, roiling with unseen things, where a Chicago cop has decided to retire. I don't have much to say, except that this doesn't interest me too much. Bro, this isn't a real genre. Like what, New York Times, what are we doing? Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney also wrote Normal People, which I've heard is one of those books that like either you love it or you hate it. So I'm assuming Intermezzo is as well. The novel is about brothers, a successful barrister? That's like what holds stairs up, right? And a competitive chess player who are mourning the death of their father and navigating the lingering bitterness between them. But its primary subject, as in all of Rooney's work, is love in its various permutations, the minutia of falling in and out of it. I'm gonna add this book to the list for a few reasons. One, I wanna read Sally Rooney, and it was either this or Normal People, if I'm being honest. And two, one of the things I heard about Normal People is that it is very intensely, and I could be completely wrong, that it is very intensely character focused. And a lot of people were kind of turned off by that because if you don't like the characters or you don't like the lives that they're living, you're not gonna be interested in the book. But I really do love when authors go all in on their 1 or 2 or 3 characters, however many characters they have. So this is interesting to me, and who knows, maybe I might not like the morning story or whatever, but I might really like the character. So I'm gonna add this to the list and just see what the vibes are with Sally Rooney. James by Percival Everett. This was all over Barnes & Noble when I went, and this reworking of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I didn't even know this was a Huck Finn remake. Jim, the enslaved man who accompanies Huck down the Mississippi River, is the narrator. Oh, crepe. And he recounts the classic tale in a language that is his own, with surprising details that reveal a far more resourceful, cunning, and powerful character than we knew. I'm interested, bro. I've heard very good things of about Demon Copperhead and Zadie Smith. I haven't heard of this book, but I have heard of Zadie Smith, and I've heard very good things about it. And this is like the book of the year for a lot of people. So I think I'm gonna add it to the list. Again, it's gonna be lower on the list towards the end of it in terms of like, I have an unlimited budget, in which order am I gonna buy these books? This is gonna be towards the end of it, but I am interested in it. Like, to see kind of a twist on the classic would be really cool. So we're adding this. Another poetry book, Joy in Service of Rue Tagore, excuse me, by Paul Muldoon. The poetry collection continues his lifelong trick of marshaling obscure references into fluent fun and rollicking lyrics that lull you with their musicality, then punch you in the gut with their full force once you decipher their meanings. I'm skipping this because I feel like I have to build my way up to a lot of poetry, you know, so I'm gonna skip this one, but I do think that again, it's gonna be one of the ones that I come back to in the future. Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser Ackner. Based on a true story, we got a dysfunctional family. Decades after the father, a prominent businessman, is kidnapped from his driveway. His adult children lay out the ways they screwed up by latent trauma, their father's repression, and the wealth that insulates them. This has neither my curiosity nor my attention, I think. Martyr. Oh my God, I've heard so many good things about Martyr. A young Iranian-American aspiring poet and recovering addict grieves his parents' deaths while fantasizing about his own in Akbar's remarkable first novel. To have a first novel that blows up as much as this book is crazy, which, haunted by death, also teems with life and the inventive beauty of its sentences, the vividness of its characters, and the surprising twists of its plots. This book was already on my TBR, or excuse me, like on my to-buy list, maybe not a to-read list, but I'm gonna add this to the current list we got building up because I've only heard good things about this book. The Mighty Red by Louis Erdrich. I think I saw this when I was at Barnes & Noble. A love triangle is at the heart of this novel, which is set against the backdrop of North Dakota, Beet Farm, during the economic meltdown of 2008/9. I don't know if you would be able to craft a more boring first sentence to a blurb. It's as much about the financial crash and environmental destruction as it is about the people most impacted by these devastations. All right, you brought me back a little bit. You're not being added to the list, but also like, you're not as bad as maybe I thought you originally were. Diane Seuss? Is there any relation? Modern poetry, the grandiose title is tongue-in-cheek mostly. These witty, sexy, sometimes heartbreakingly personal lyrics demonstrate how ordinary life can be the stuff of poetry, and also thrillingly how poetry can be a vital part of modern life. You're not getting added to the list, but this is a good blurb. I respect the blurb, you know? A graphic novel, I think this is the first graphic novel on the list. My favorite thing is Monsters Book 2 by Emil Ferris. So the original 2017 graphic novel was a beguiling, haunted hybrid of personal memoir and murder mystery and the 20th century time portal. You're following 10-year-old Karen Reyes in circa 1968 Chicago as she wrestles with loss, sexual identity, and hosts of secrets. I don't know if this book is for me. We're skipping this one. The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett, a modern take on the epistolary novel. I don't know what that is. To Google we go. An epistolary novel is a novel written as a series of letters between the fictional characters. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. This riveting mystery lets readers sift through texts, emails, and WhatsApp messages alongside a true crime journalist in an effort to discover the real story behind a series of occult deaths. Now that I know what an epistolary novel is, this is cool. So like you're solving the crime alongside the journalist. That's rad. You're getting added to the list, Janice Hallett. I hope your day is going wonderful. Neighbors and Other Stories by Diane Oliver, the deceptively powerful posthumous collection by a writer who died at 22 follows the everyday routines of Black families as they negotiate separate but equal Jim Crow strictures only to discover uglier truths. I already have 12 books that I want to read, and I want to read them all more than I want to read this one currently. But this is probably the one that I'm most interested in coming back to, I'll say that much. Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst, their latest, brings readers deep into the trials and tribulations of Dave Wynn, an English-Burmese actor confronting confusing relationships, his emerging sexuality, racism, and England's changing political climate over the course of his life, all tied together by Hollinghurst's keen eye and affecting prose. I'm skipping it. Gourmet Eurotrip romance is not a genre. I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna say it. Y'all can leave a hate comment down below. That's not a genre. The Pairing by Casey McQuiston, I hope that's how you pronounce it. A queer romance from the author of Red, White, and Royal Blue. Theo and Kit, two exes who haven't seen each other since their disastrous breakup, find themselves on the same European food tour. This book is a sexy sensory feast, weaving together luscious descriptions of petal pink pastries, salted Negronis, and lavender-strewn countrysides amid the inferno of their rekindled passion. This ain't for me. Next, Piglet by Lottie Hazel. 2 weeks before her wedding, a cookbook editor at a London publishing house discovers that her fiancé is cheating on her. Determined to meet her family's ridiculously high expectations and hungry, in every sense of the word, for perfection, she forges ahead with plans for the wedding of everyone else's dreams. I love a zoom. Oh, wait, that's a watercolor boyga. That's crazy. That's a funny cover. I like that cover. I'm not going to read this book, but the cover... They spazzed with the cover on this one. This might be our first science fiction book, The Practice, The Horizon, and The Chain by Sophia Samatar. Great name. Failing with sly and slicing grace, this far future fable is set on spaceships stratified into rigid social structures. A professor plucks a boy from the lowest level, called the Hold, to be equal parts educated by and exhibited to the faculty and other students. But what the boy and the professor learn from each other... Do you not know I'm trying to record right now? That's crazy. But what the boy and the professor learn from each other changes them both and could transform their worlds. I hope there's more science fiction on the list, because as much as I want to read science fiction, I don't have a lot of it in my bookcase that I'm looking at right now. So this doesn't grab my attention at all. But it makes me remember, oh, I should probably read science fiction more. Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright. This bracing satire of clashing worldviews in Australia begins with the toxic haze settling over an Aboriginal town, where one resident believes he can fight climate change by replacing conventional transport with hordes of donkeys. The novel only gets stranger and funnier from there. It might get stranger, it might get funnier, but it does not get more attention grabbing. I don't even know what that means, but I'm skipping this one. Ooh, a book in 10 parts. We have Rake's Fall by Chandrasekhara. I'm trying my best here. It shifts wildly in structure and narration, uniting all threads. This is kind of an oscillating theme. Souls return over time, sometimes as two people, sometimes four or more, engaged with each other over the thorny question of how to endure fascism and kill kings. Hold up. That last sentence got me. Not enough to get added to the list, but enough to on my own. All right, I see you. Reboot by Justin Taylor, a satire of modern media and pop culture, follows a former child actor who is trying to revive the TV show that made him famous. Taylor delves into the world of online fandom while exploring the inner life of a man seeking redemption and something meaningful to do. I don't think this is for me. Not Safe for Work Stories. Rejection by Tony Tuathimut. I hope I said that correctly. This collection of linked stories tracks the losers in the Great American Popularity Contest. Shoegazers who are mostly short and unattractive and cut from the herd. Tuathimut is writing about alienation and skin starvation, a longing for the non-existent, touches of friends, and the embraces of lovers. This is a crazy sentence in this article by, I want to see who the author is so I can credit them, Dwight Garner, who wrote right here that I read Rejection during a week when I felt down and it almost stubbed me out like a cigarette. That's a crazy sentence. That right there, a Mr. Tony, that got you added to the list. David, is that your name? Or excuse me, Dwight Garner got you added to the list. That's crazy, bro. The Safekeep by Yale van der Wooden. In this taut remarkable novel set in 1960s Amsterdam, Isabel clings to her childhood home after the death of her mother, fixating on a broken china plate. When her brother brings his girlfriend into the house, Isabel is rude to the point of cruelty, until the novel's psychological drama gives way to a love story of such intensity that it is easy to forget about the broken china. Yeah. The Sequel by John Humph Corlitz. This delicious follow-up to the plot finds Anna Williams Bonner basking in literary acclaim and moolah from her husband's estate until pesky excerpts, oh my god, I can't read, from a manuscript resurface and put questions of authorship and the publishing world's values under a microscope. That's a bad cover, bro. What? I was already 50-50 on the book. That's a bad cover. We're not doing this. Shred Sisters by Betsy Lerner. This coming-of-age novel, overcast with the inconstant cloud of mental illness, maps the effect of a daughter's volatility on her parents and younger sister, and probes what exactly it means for love to be unconditional. Huh. Don't tell nobody. I'm skipping this one. The Silence of the Choir by Mohammed Bugar Sar. 72 migrants settle in a small Sicilian town in this polyphonic novel translated into English. Sar, who won the Prix Goncourt, France's most prestigious literary prize, I pronounced that incorrectly, my bad, in 2021, not only follows the newcomers, but also considers the inner lives of villagers whose reactions vary considerably. There's not enough for me to go off of on this blurb for me to add it to the list, but I do think that this might be one that I end up coming back to. So I'm gonna skip it, but I don't feel too bad about it. Smoke Kings by Jamal Mayfield. Can there ever be restitution for the harm done to generations of Black people in America? Mayfield takes the question to a provocative extreme in this thriller, which follows a group of 4 friends as they kidnap descendants of people who committed racially motivated hate crimes. Whoa, that's interesting. Get added to the list, Jamal Mayfield. That's crazy. Now I'm interested. And also, I don't think I have that many thriller books, and I love thriller movies. I'm not a big horror movie guy at all, but thrillers I really enjoy. So a thriller book sounds really interesting too. Someone Like Us by Dana Mengetsu. Their brilliantly slippery novel centers on a journalist who is supposed to spend Christmas with his wife and young son. Instead, he ends up in Chicago investigating the criminal record of a man he assumes is his father. Didn't grab me. We're skipping that one. Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. The follow-up to the debut is part prequel and part sequel. Trails a young survivor in the 19th century massacre of Native Americans. It says right here, for fans of Martyr, And so I think, and I'm not gonna add this to the list, but I think I will read Martyr, and if I like it, I'll come back to this, but it's not a priority in any sense of the word. Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor. Brief, blunt, and exquisite. O'Connor's debut was set in the fall of 1938 on a Welsh island with a population of 47, including the bright, restless 18-year-old Manon. I think I've said no, I'm gonna say no to this book, but I feel like I've said no to a lot of historical fiction, which is a genre that really interests me and that I really want to start reading more of. Maybe just these descriptions aren't doing too much for me, but I hope there's more historical fiction as we go on, because it's a genre, like I said, that I want to like get into more. What Does It Feel Like by Sophie Kinsella, a best-selling author and mother of 5, wakes up from surgery to remove a brain tumor and needs to be reminded again and again how she has arrived at this point. Kinsella's autobiographical novel is both devastating and, against all odds, devastatingly funny. No, this doesn't sound funny. This sounds sad. I'm skipping this. Wild Houses by Colin Barrett. After a poorly planned abduction upends the lives of several young characters in a rural Irish town, Barrett shifts gracefully between the kidnappee who's being held in a basement by 2 unstable brothers and his intrepid girlfriend who sets out to find him. Not for me, I think. Not for me. The Woman by Kristen Hanna. In her latest historical novel, Hanna shows the Vietnam War through the eyes of combat nurse. Interesting perspective, okay. But what the former debutante witnesses and experiences when she comes home from the war is the true gut punch of this timely story. I like the point of view. That sounds interesting, but everything else, not so much. I might look into Kristen Hanna's other work and see if there's something that interests me a little bit more. But for right now, this book doesn't really do it for me. You Dreamed of Empires by Alvaro Enrique. I forgot who it was. It's some big YouTuber, booktube person I saw that was recommending this book. The Mexican writer Enrique recites the fateful meeting between Hernan Cortez and the Aztecs in this hallucinatory novel, translated by Natasha Wimmer. Moctezuma is fearsome yet depressed, often tripping on magic mushrooms while the conquistadors grow increasingly anxious. I like this. I specifically remember the cover from maybe they were building their bookcase or something. I forget exactly what video I saw it in, but I like this point of view. To the list you go, Alvaro. Let's go. You Should Be So Lucky, a sports romance book. I got nothing against romances. I think I have a romance book in this list, which is big for me. But a sports romance book, I don't know about all that. We're gonna skip it. We might be halfway, and I love nonfiction reading so much, so I feel like there's gonna be a lot of books that I wanna add to my list, even though I've already added probably 15 from the fiction list. The Achilles Trap by Steve Cole. This history stretches from Hussein's earliest days in power to the US invasion of Iraq in March of 2003, tracking the dictator's mind with the help of 2,000 hours of rarely accessed audio from high-level meetings that Hussein recorded as assiduously as Richard Nixon, Cole says. I like the concept of this book. I'm not super interested in reading about the Iraq War. Maybe someday I will, but not right now. But like I said, one of the best things about this video, about this article, is that neither of these two things are going anywhere. So I can come back to this, especially when I'm looking at books that I didn't add to my list. This is definitely one of the ones that I'm not going to add to the list, but that I might come back to. Feel Bad memoir is funny. As a genre, that's funny. All the Worst Humans by Phil Elwood. This memoir by a former public relations operative for the wealthy and the corrupt is greasy fun, stocked with scoundrels, cocktails, and guns, and showing off the charm and quick wit that catapulted Elwood to the top of the sleazy, amoral world of high-end spin. I like the concept of this book, but it's not for me, I think. All Things Are Too Small by Becca Rothfield, which is an essay collection, it looks like. A striking debut by a young critic who has been heralded as a throwback to an era of livelier discourse. Rothfeld has published widely and works currently as a nonfiction book critic for the Washington Post. Her interests range far, but these essays are united by a plea for more excess in all things, especially thought. I'm not adding it to the list, I'll spoil it now, but this is a tough not add. I think the fact that I already have all this in here kind of makes me not want to add this. But again, this is, I love that the internet is forever. So I love that I can come back to this, because I'm not going to add this to the list now, but I might come back to it in the future. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. In the coddling of the American mind, Haidt took a hard stand against helicopter parenting. In this pugnacious, which is a word I've never heard of, follow-up, he turns to what he sees as technology's dangers for young people. A digital absolutist cedes no ground on the issue of social media. I'm interested in this book. Like I've said, I've seen like people physically reading this multiple times, but also like as someone who grew up like towards like before social media was a thing, and then I was like where like a couple people used it, maybe a few people you knew used it, to most people you knew using it, to where we are now where it's like a regular part of everybody's life. But also especially now that I make content and that I make YouTube videos, I think this book would be like a very interesting read. Be Ready When Luck Happens by Ina Garten. She's the Food Network lady. Oh, so this is a memoir. Okay, in this memoir, however, she shows how much luck and labor it took to achieve the success that she clearly enjoys. I respect that she wrote this. I'm not gonna read it, but I respect that she wrote it. Like, she's had an insane career when it comes to being like a popular or a pop culture chef, excuse me. And she's also just a very good chef in general. Not for me, but like I'm glad she wrote it. The Black Box by Henry Louis Gates Jr. In his latest book, The Harvard Scholar shows how African-American writers have used the written word to shape their reality despite constraints imposed on them from outside, using the metaphor of the box to reflect ordeals withstood and survived since Africans were first brought to the continent. This book doesn't super do it for me, or excuse me, this description of the book doesn't super do it for me, but I will be looking into Henry Louis Gates Jr. since it says right here it's his latest book. He has other books, and so I want to see maybe what else he got going on. But I don't think this book does it for me right now where I'm at with what I want to read. The Black Utopians by Aaron Robertson. The farm Robertson's grandparents owned in Promised Land, Tennessee, a town founded by formerly enslaved people after the Civil War, serves as a springboard for this sensitive, often deeply personal exploration of utopianism in Black American thought and life. This might be the first screw it add to the list. I think maybe if I was in a different mood, I wouldn't add this book to the list, but something about it makes me want to add it to the list. So I'm going to add it to the list. Who's stopping me? You're not stopping me. The Blue Stockings by Susanna Gibson. Before Mary Wollstonecraft, Susan B. Anthony, or Virginia Woolf, there were the Blue Stockings, a group of British women writers and thinkers who, as Gibson writes in this intimate social history, transgressed sexist conventions to educate themselves, produce books on a range of subjects, and contribute to some of England's liveliest salons. I'm interested in this subject matter, but I don't know if I'm interested in the Blue Stockings version of this subject matter. So I'm not going to add this to the list, but I hope there's some more feminist history on later in the list. I don't want to read about the Challenger, bro. That's sad. And I know I got some sad books on the list, but like, this is sad. I saw this book in Barnes & Noble, Chop, Fry, Watch, and Learn by Michelle T. King. In 1971, this newspaper called Fu Pei Mai the Julia Child of Chinese cooking. Big praise. But as King's biography notes, it was really the other way around. The legendary Fu, who taught generations to cook dishes from all over China, preceded Child on TV by 2 months. King interviews women who learned from Fu's cookbooks and show, making the case that she was a cultural force. I like this. Hold on. I like that it's respectful to Julia Child, but also saying that Fu Pei Mai also came first. And like I said, I love cooking. Cooking is something I love to do. Reading a book about someone who cooks, this is interesting. Again, like some of these are light adds to the list. Some of these are really strong adds to the list. I think this is a light add to the list, but it's still interesting. Circle of Hope by Liza Griswold. As many Americans' evangelical congregations moved to the political right over the past decade, Circle of Hope in Philadelphia became more progressive. With sensitivity and compassion, Griswold chronicles the church's fateful decision to embrace a mission of racial justice, delivering in her account of the crisis that followed a portrait in miniature of our passionate, divided nation. This is a very good blurb for this sort of book. It's not something I'm super interested in reading, but I do like the way they were able to describe everything that's going to happen in this book. And yeah, it sounds interesting. It's just not something I really want to read right now. Cocktails with George and Martha by Philip Gefter. Rarely seen diary entries from the screenwriter who adapted Edward Albee's Broadway hit are a highlight of this unapologetically obsessive behind-the-scenes look at classic film starring Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. I would love to read more about film history. I don't think this book is it, but thank you for reminding me that this genre exists. A World War II memoir, Cold Crematorium by Joseph Debrezenny. I hope I pronounced that somewhat correctly. It is a Holocaust memoir by a journalist and poet internee, translated by Paul Alchvery. The details of the concentration camps and their horrors are rendered so precisely that any critical distance collapses. Debrezenny's account was published in the 50s and lay obscure for decades because of Cold War politics. I got a bunch of sad books. I don't know if I want to read more about the Holocaust. I read Man's Search for Meaning. I read Man's Search for Meaning a few times actually, and that was a very vivid and very good kind of rendering of what an internment camp during the Holocaust looked like. And I don't know if I want to read more of that right now. I think at some point I will, like I said, similar to the World War II memoir. I know at some point I'll want to read more about that kind of specific time in our history and in the world's history, but I don't think right now is it. Connie by Connie Chung. Her entertaining and revealing memoir traces the triumphs and disappointments of her groundbreaking career in broadcast journalism, which reached its pinnacle when she was named co-anchor of the CBS Evening News alongside Dan Rather, only to see herself sidelined by a controlling Rather and by sexism in the industry. I think I would want to read this book if I knew who Connie Chung was. Unfortunately, I just didn't grow up watching CBS Evening News, and I'm sure that a majority of this was even before my time. So while I would be interested in learning more about Connie Chung, I don't think my first introduction to her should be her memoir, if that makes sense. Maybe y'all agree with that. Maybe y'all think something differently. Leave a comment down below and kind of let me know what your thoughts are on that. Cue the Sun by Emily Nussbaum, which looks to be the origin story of reality TV. I've never been a super big reality TV guy, so I'm sure if I ever got into it, this book would be like a lot more interesting to me. The only reality TV show I want to watch, the only TV show I want to watch is Love is Blind, and I don't know what it is about Love is Blind, but the concept is so interesting to me. And I've had some people on like podcasts, people you would not expect. I listen to a basketball podcast, they're talking about Love is Blind. I'm watching people play board games, they're talking about Love is Blind. So I don't know if I'm the one that's missing out on Love is Blind and it's just always been good, but I want to get into it. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten into it yet, and I haven't gotten into reality TV in general, and I'm not at the point where I want to read about its origins, so we're going to leave Emily Nussbaum's Cue the Sun off of the list. Do Something by Guy Trebay. He is a veteran of the style wars. He did stints as a handbag designer. This memoir is indeed of a who's who that vanished Gotham, but more than that, it's a love letter to a city, a life, and a family, and to beauty itself. Never been a really big fashion guy. This might be a gift for like someone like my sister who's always been really into fashion and learning about like fashion history and stuff like that. But for me, I think it's better left off of the list. Classical music history. Interesting. Every Valley by Charles King. King uses Handel's Messiah, possibly, quote, the greatest piece of participatory art ever created, as a hub whose spokes radiate outward to a host of key historical forces and personalities that characterize 18th century Britain. I don't know who Charles King is, and I don't know who Handel is, and I don't know what Messiah is. So I don't feel like I'm the target audience for this book, and because of that, we're gonna leave it off the list. Next up, we have Everyone Who Is Gone Is Here by Jonathan Blitzer. That name sounds familiar. I might have read like an article or something, of his before. This urgent and propulsive account of Latin American politics and immigration makes a persuasive case for a direct line from U.S. foreign policy in Central America to the current migrant crisis. I'm not going to add this to the list, but I do want to look up Jonathan Blitzer more because that name sounds familiar and I know I recognize him from somewhere. Fee, F.I. by Alexandria Fuller. In her fifth memoir, Fuller describes the sudden death of her 21-year-old son. That's terrible. Devastating as this elegant and honest account may be, it's certainly not for the faint of heart. It also leaves the reader with a sense of having known a lovely and lively young man. I'm gonna add this to the list, and it's a weird add to the list because there are books that I have passed on that I have been quote unquote more interested in reading, but also grief and death is something that I just haven't read too much about. And luckily, I'm very lucky that I have not had to deal with death or grief too much in my life. Like, of course, like there's instances, but definitely not to the extent that some people I know have. So I think getting this book and kind of immersing myself in something that I'm not typically forced or typically something that I have to immerse myself in would be very helpful, both for just my general well-being, and also, like, again, I spoke about this earlier, but like my knowledge base on the subject matter. So I'm gonna add this to the list. I'm sure it'll be towards the bottom of like the books that I actually get and read, but I'm interested. Curiosity and attention. Health and Safety by Emily Witt. Witt's boyfriend Andrew started behaving erratically when pandemic lockdowns put an end to the underground party scene in Brooklyn's Bushwick neighborhood. Health and Safety, which braids that scene, Andrew's breakdown, and Witt's work as a journalist during the first Trump administration, also encompasses a bigger breakdown, one that eroded the boundaries between their subculture and the work at large, or excuse me, the world at large. I don't think this book is for me, but I do like this cover. There's beauty in the badness here. The Hidden Glow by Atosa Araxia Abrahamian. That's a great name. A journalist who grew up in Geneva, Abrahamian explores the spread of free ports, free zones, and other extraterritorial domains of the sort common in her hometown, all created to benefit wealthy people or countries by offering them special perks or exempting them from local laws and regulations. I'm adding this to the list. Hey y'all, Editing Chris here. So a few things happened. At this point, my phone, which is my recording device, ran out of battery and the recording stopped. I realized it. I was able to kind of like get back in the flow of things once I charged my phone, but it was out of focus. Don't we love when things are out of focus? So I just wanted to let y'all know that the remainder of this video will be a little bit blurry, and I apologize for that. But my audio's still good, and you still get to learn about some more books, so you still have that going for you. So I apologize, and I hope you can still make it to the end of the video. We are getting towards the end of the list, which is really awesome, so I think we're gonna kind of breeze through these last few books here, and by few, it's probably like 15 or 20 if I had to guess. I Heard Her Call My Name by Lucy Sante, who for decades has been a leading literary and cultural critic. Here traces her late in life gender transition, reflecting on a career of seeking truths through writing while hiding an important truth about herself. That's a good distinction. I'm glad they said that. That sounds really interesting. The book vividly presents New York in the 1970s and documents a transformation both internal and external. I haven't heard of this book or this author at all, if I'm being fully honest with y'all, but it sounds like an interesting book. Again, it doesn't meet the criteria for my list, you know, the incredibly like rigorous rules and expectations that have been set for the list I have. But this is one of the books that I want to come back to maybe in like a month or two after I've gotten a little bit deeper in my TBR. Next, we have a collection of essays called I Just Keep Talking, Don't We All? By Nell Irvin Painter, a historian and author who left academia to attend art school at 64. Good for them. Highlights her original mind and irreverent wit in this collection, with reflections on Black American figures, including Sojourner Truth, Martin R. Delaney, and Clarence Thomas, intersped with artwork by Painter herself. Not right now for me, but definitely in the future I'll come back to this. Which I know I've said that a lot, but definitely like I definitely will be coming back to a lot of these books, maybe for like a Notable Books TBR Part 2. Next up, we have John Lewis by David Greenberg, a biography that tells the full story of the civil rights hero who became a long-serving U.S. representative and moral force in America. I'm not sure if I'm really in the mood for a little biography. I've heard many good things about John Lewis, and I've heard exactly one review about this book, and it was positive. But every book that I currently have on my notable books list, I want to read more than John Lewis's biography, so we're gonna skip that. A survival memoir, that's interesting. In this candid, plain-spoken memoir, Rushdie recalls the attempted assassination. Oh, this is Knife by Salman Rushdie, or Rushdie, excuse me. They recall the attempted assassination he survived survived in 2022 during a presentation about keeping the world's writers safe from harm. Ironic. His attacker had piranha energy. Rushdie lost an eye, but he has slowly recovered thanks to the attentive care of doctors and wife he celebrates. Meditations after an attempted murder is a crazy subtitle, but this is going to be a conditional not add to the list. And what I mean by that is I want to see how long this book is. I don't know if I could read like 500 pages of this guy's survival, as terrible as that sounds, but maybe I could read like 200, give or take. Linguistic anthropology, that's a great genre. Language City by Ross Perlin, A History of New York. Perlin, a linguist, focuses on residents fighting to preserve their spoken heritages. The result is sweeping and intimate, simultaneously a call to arms and a tribute to a place that contains almost as many tongues as speakers. That's really interesting. You know what? I'll add it to the list. I've never read a linguistic anthropological book before, but we'll add it to the list. Lovely One, which I have heard of this book before, by Ketanji Brown Jackson. She is a Supreme Court a Supreme Court's newest justice. It's a memoir that is deeply personal and full of hope and highlights a fairy tale marriage to her college boyfriend. That is like a weird thing to add. I feel like the blurb of a Supreme Court justice memoir should be about her being a Supreme Court justice and not about her marriage to her college boyfriend. That seems like a weird addition to me. I probably wasn't gonna read this anyway, but maybe that's more of the blurb writers and the story's fault. And maybe the marriage to her college boyfriend is like a very big part of the book, you know? Madness by Antonia Hilton. Hilton spent a decade researching the history of Crownsville, a segregated mental hospital that operated in Maryland for 91 years. The result is not just a work of painstaking reporting, but a deeply human, often tragic story of an American failure to care for Black minds and bodies. We're gonna skip this one, but I do like that this story is being told, obviously. The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I've seen a lot of talk about this online, about this book online, fusing a meditation on the political potential of storytelling with intimate accounts of trips to Senegal, where he visits the former slave trading center Gorée Island, South Carolina, to support a high school instructor under fire for teaching his prize-winning book Between the World and Me, and the West Bank, where he witnesses life under the Israeli occupation. Coates decries justice and the Western media's complicity in it. I don't have any books on current events. This might be the only current events book that we've gotten on this list so far. So I'm gonna add it to the list. Again, it's probably gonna be closer to the end of the book, or excuse me, the end of the list than it is to the beginning. There's certainly books on here that I wanna read more. But this does seem interesting, and I love a book on current events. I don't have many books on current events, so I'd love to add some new ones. Another book on India, The New India by Rahul Bhatia. An Indian investigative journalist, Bhatia watched in dismay as relatives, friends, and fellow citizens embraced the increasingly extreme politics of his country's Hindu nationalist Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. In this ambitiously reported account, he chronicles India's turn toward authoritarianism and violence through the stories of ordinary people and public figures. So we do have another book. This one's getting added to the list. We do have another book about this new era in India's history that we're currently going through. Towards the beginning, I think it was Black River. Yes, it was Black River. And so I probably am not going to read both of them, even though I'm adding New India to the list. I'm probably going to maybe read the first chapter of both of the books and then pick whichever one is able to grab me more instantaneously, because this adoption of these extreme politics that this blurb talks about has been really talked about in the news recently, and for a long period of time, not just recently. But it is something that I've been vaguely interested in, but I didn't even know where to start in terms of what research should I do. So this seems like a good starting point, either this or Black River. So either one I'm okay with. The New York Game by Kevin Baker. What makes New York baseball unique is its role as a chronicler of cultural change. Whatever baseball's roots in cow pastures and small towns, it came of age as an urban game. I'm definitely gonna add this to the list. Like I said, I'm a big basketball guy, but I'm not really super interested in every other sport. But I'd love for this to be a good introduction, not only into baseball as a sport in general, but also as its rich history as part of it is the American pastime. We have another family history memoir, No One Gets to Fall Apart by Sarah Labrie. In her affecting debut, a bunch of debut novels here for the 100 most notable books of 2024. That's awesome. In her affecting debut, the TV writer chronicles her mother's descent into what would eventually be diagnosed as schizophrenia, while also exploring the through line of mental illness that snakes through her family. In an inner monologue that reveals snippets of bizarre behavior, Labrie also worries about her own tenuous grasp on emotional stability, imagining her mother's mental illness, quote, making its way through her into me. That's a crazy description. What? You're getting added to the list just off the description. That's wild. Private Revolutions by Yuan Yang. For 6 years, Yang, a journalist, followed 4 very different young women as they navigated what she calls China's new social order, a country changing dramatically into an industrial superpower. The result is a moving work of reportage that toggles between global and personal. I would love to read this. Again, I don't have many current event books on this list, and I'd love to get I guess I am you have people that are like romance girlies. I'm definitely like a nonfiction boy, you know? This seems really interesting to get a female journalist perspective, to get 4 other very different young women's perspective in a country that has, you know, pretty heavily prioritized the male perspective for such a long time. I think this is a great way to learn about currently, or what's going on currently in China's kind of like transition into this global superpower that they talk about. Reagan? You want me to read a political biography on Ronald Reagan? The Rebels Clinic by Adam Schatz. This absorbing biography of the Black psychiatrist, writer, and revolutionary Frantz Fanon highlights a side of him that's often eclipsed by his image as a zealous partisan, that of the caring doctor who ran a secret clinic for Algerian rebels. I don't think this is for me. Next, we have The Return of Great Powers by Jim Sciutto. Sciutto's absorbing account of 21st century brinkmanship takes readers from Ukraine in the days before Russia's invasion to the Taiwan Strait, where Chinese jets flying overhead raise tensions across the region. The author also shows how the battles are waged not just on the ground and in the air, but also in undersea communication cables, across satellites in outer space, and over the growing frontiers of artificial intelligence. This is too much for me. The next World War, that's too much and too serious to think about for me right now. I love this cover, oh my god. Next up, we have Salvage by Diane Brand, a Trinidadian-born poet and novelist, wears her erudition lightly in this eloquent and witty book of essayistic meditations on English literary classics, teasing out the ways in which novels from Thackeray's Vanity Fair to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre conceal within their pages the ravages of British colonialism for its Black and Indigenous subjects. Zadie Smith I've heard a lot about, so for this to be considered, or excuse me, for fans of Zadie Smith, I think is really cool. Oh my god, I love this. I'm not adding this book to the list right now, but I do realize that I have been passing up on a lot of literary criticism, so it's a genre that I have to do more research in, because I'm sure there's some literary criticism that I'll like, just as I'm sure there's some like romance books that I'll like, but currently this one, like this little blurb doesn't really do it for me, so I have to do more research into the genre of literary criticism and see if there's something I could find that like tickles my fancy, you know? Soldiers and Kings by Jason De Leon, a feat of immersive fieldwork. This account by an anthropologist nearly 7 years in the making shines needed light on the lives of human smugglers, many of them fleeing the same violence and poverty as their clients, who ferry migrants across the southern border. I'm gonna be honest, like I'm very interested in this book, and I wish I could give you an exact reason on why it's grabbed me and why I want to put it on the list, but I can't. I guess that was just a good blurb, and the cover's fine, I guess, but like, I just want to add this to the list. Splinters by Leslie Jamison. I wish I could remember which YouTuber I saw talking about this book, but I remember seeing someone talk about it in like a book haul video or something like that. Jamison, who has previously written stylishly about her experiences with addiction, abortion, and more, here delivers a searing account of divorce and the bewildering joys of new motherhood, cementing her status as one of America's most talented self-chroniclers. I don't think I care enough about Leslie Jamison to read a whole book about her life, but maybe one day I will. Right now, though, we're skipping. Next up, we have Stolen Pride by Arlie Russell Hochschild. The renowned sociologist returns with a sequel to her prescient Strangers in Their Own Land, a Trump country dispatch from the Deep South. This time, she takes stock of the financial and emotional struggles of an Appalachian coal mining town, where a caravan of white supremacists arrive to find new recruits shortly after Donald Trump's 2016 presidential win. I'm sure this book is getting a lot of reads now, just because of like the current political climate and with the election that just happened, but it is not something that I am currently interested in reading, unfortunately. I got this one. I spoiled it for myself. I apologize. But The Swans of Harlem by Karen Valby. For those who believe that the narrative of Black prima ballerinas begins and ends with Misty Copeland's, Valby's rich, prismatic portrait of the 5 dancers who formed the core of the dance theater of Harlem's inaugural 1969 class offers a joyful and spirited corrective. I saw this cover. I saw a physical copy of this book at Barnes & Noble, and it seemed really, really interesting. I'm going to add it to the list just because I'm so happy about There's Always This Year being on the list. But also ballerinas, and especially like the Black prima ballerina space, is something I have absolutely no knowledge in. So it'd be really interesting to like get a little bit of an insight, just get any insight. There's Always This Year. I've been waiting for this to come out since it was announced. It's one of the few books that I've like actually been waiting for the release date, and I like fully lost track of time, and I go to Barnes & Noble with my mom and I see it physically, and I decided against buying it because I am currently on a book buying ban. But I really want to get a physical copy of this book. There's Always This Year by Hanif Abdurraqib. Growing up on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, a cultural critic and poet, was hugely influenced by LeBron James, but basketball was also a more personal utopia for him and his community, quote, a little slice of street ball heaven. And that really connects with my personal experience with basketball, where like I knew from a young age I wasn't gonna go pro or make it to the league or anything like that, but basketball was something for me that it was not only just a workout, like a physical thing, but I could also spend time with some of my closest friends and be part of a team and learn how to be a leader. And something that a lot of people don't focus on is learn how to be a follower when you have to be a follower. And so basketball for me was a combination of a whole bunch of things, and I feel like that combination of a whole bunch of things doesn't really get talked about as much as it should. And so when I first heard of this book and I read whatever little description there was about this book before it officially came out, I was like immediately attached to it, and I can't wait to read this book. This is already on my TBR, but I'm gonna add it to this one because I don't want to forget that this book exists. Next up, we have a book on religion, Undivided by Hari Hahn. When Hahn, a political scientist, learned that a mostly white and broadly conservative Cincinnati megachurch had resolved to fight racial injustice in its community, she decided to follow the story. The result is a sensitive study of admirable intentions, earnest action, and the often painful price of real change. I like that last sentence. This is a tough leave off of the list. I think this is one of the books that I'm definitely going to like look into a little more once I finish recording this video, but I'm currently not gonna put it on the list. We have A Walk in the Park by Kevin Fedarko. 2 friends decide to walk the length of the Grand Canyon. That's crazy. What could go wrong? I'm assuming everything. As this wildly entertaining book demonstrates, everything you can imagine and then some. Fedarko takes us for a ride that's often harrowing, frequently hilarious, and full of wonderful nature writing. Now, I'm not a big nature writing guy, but that's also the thought I had before I read The Overstory, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So I think just off the hype that I have for Overstory, I'm gonna add this to the list, but definitely I think it has a high chance to be taken off the list, especially if I don't like kind of the very beginnings of the book, if that makes sense. When the Clock Broke by John Gons, an account of America in the 90s, Gons ditches the familiar narrative about a decade of relative peace and prosperity for a disturbing tale of populists, nativists, and demagogues who, acting on the margins of US politics, helped shatter the post-Cold War consensus and usher in anti-democratic forces that plague the country today. I don't think I have this book in me. I'm just being honest. I don't think I have the mental fortitude to read about populists and nativists and demagogues in the 90s. I just don't think I got it. The Wide, Wide Sea by Hampton Sides, who tracks Captain Cook's third and final voyage across the globe, painting a vivid and propulsive portrait of an explorer reckoning with the fallout of what he and others had wrought into expanding the map of Europe's power. That's interesting because going off the first little bit of that little description, I thought this was gonna be like the general history of pirates, where it's just almost like an itemized textbook like history, but also if it dives into the fallout of expanding Europe's power in a time where like Europe was really the only country that was like trying to sail past its borders and around the worlds and stuff like that. So this is getting added to the list, and if I ever get my hands on it, I really want to see what the book decides to focus more on. If it's more so kind of detailing the adventure that James Cook went on, awesome, or if it's more detailing like the fallout, like it says, of these across the globe adventures and the ramifications that they had. Or maybe it's just a good combination of the two, who knows? We're at the last thing. I've been recording for so long, I completely forgot. Biography of a Marriage, that's a weird genre. A Wilder Shore by Camille Perry. Robert Louis Stevenson's American wife, Fanny Van de Grift, was a powerful personality in her own right, an individualist who paid no mind to conventional gender roles, and a brave and sometimes reckless adventurer who encouraged Stevenson's penchant for a wandering life. When we were at the previous book, I forget what it's called, but the previous book where the genre was like feminist history or feminist literature or something like that, I don't remember what it was about that didn't grab me, but this definitely does. An individualist who paid no mind to conventional gender roles and a brave and sometimes reckless adventurer. I love that for her. I want to read this book. But we have done it, y'all. We have made it to the end of the list of books in 2024 that the New York Times Book Review have designated as notable. And I hope you enjoyed this extra long video. Like I said, one of the main reasons that I made this video was because I kind of wanted to expose myself to different books and different genres that I would never even think of looking up, that I've never heard before, that I have never even thought about like researching. And even though it wasn't like the main goal of this video, I still wanted to like write some of these books down that I would want to read. And we made it to 31 books. There's 31 books here that even vaguely interested me enough to copy and paste them into a separate document. And I know you'll probably got tired of hearing me say it, but I'm definitely going to be coming back to this article and to this list of books. I like that there were a lot of authors from a lot of various viewpoints, from a lot of various countries. There were translated works in here. There were work by trans authors in here. So there was a lot of stuff in here that seemed really interesting to me. And whether or not they were on my like official list, I think is more so just for me. I think a lot of the books that were written about here were really interesting. And I hope that through this extra long video, y'all were able to find some books that interested you or like piqued your interest or something like that. Or like I was saying earlier, got your curiosity and your attention. But thank you especially for making it to this point in the video. If you liked anything I said at all in this video, please leave a like. If you have any comments on the list that the New York Times made, but also if you have comments on the books that I added to my list, or specifically the books that I didn't add to my list, please leave a comment down below. Like I said, we're at a point with this YouTube channel where I'm very small and I can respond to every comment and have a conversation with y'all that leave comments. So I would really appreciate that. I love building our own little community here. And if you like this video or any of the other videos that I have on my channel, there should be some videos popping up on screen right now that you could also watch. If you like any of that, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It lets me know that there are people out there who like what I'm doing and who like this little community that we're building. So I would really appreciate it if you're able to subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.